אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
You know, it would be foolish to tell you that as a man standing before a war that there's no fear. I really feel like we have no other choice.
ואני מתלונן! אני צועק, אני משתין בלילה מפוסט-טראומה! הוא בא אליי ואומר לי, למה הרגת אותי? למה הרגת אותי?
June 5th, 1967, during the Six-Day War, a deadly Israeli soldier, Netanyahu, fought the Battle of Katef in Sinai, killing enemies like flies. However, he got wounded during the battle, an injury that would change the course of his life forever. Here are the 10 deadliest Israeli soldiers and what happened to them after serving their country. Number 10. Nikim Cohen. June 5th, 1967. Cohen, a man blessed with the art of war, led his men to the battlefield against Egyptian military forces. However, the outcome would drastically change the course of his life. Years before the war, Cohen was born in Jerusalem to Shalom and Shoshana Cohen. He attended elementary school in the Bet HaKarem neighborhood of Jerusalem and later attended Beit Hinuk High School in that same city. However, school was never the path designated for this man, so once he graduated, he joined the IDF. Upon joining the IDF, Cohen demonstrated sheer willpower and trained like he had been gifted with the power of 1,000 Hercules. It didn't take long for the unit commanders to notice his extraordinary skills, and in turn draft him as a soldier under the Savaret Maktal Special Force Unit. However, this move eventually got him killed. June 1967. There was a war between Israel and a coalition of Arab states. But in the days leading up to this war, Cohen, who was already a deputy commander, was told to lead his men into the battlefield after the unexpected death of his superior. Cohen, born ready to yield a gun and fight for his country, immediately gathered his men and marched to Kirbat Zetun in the Gaza area, camouflaging themselves and observing radio silence before being ordered to advance. On June 5th, Israel launched a ton of preemptive airstrikes against Egyptian airfields and other facilities, kickstarting the war and crippling the Egyptian Air Force. But on the other hand, Egyptian forces on land outnumbered the IDF by a few thousand. The IDF knew this, so their only hope of victory was to capitalize on the element of surprise. While this worked for the most part, it resulted in the death of Nikim Cohen, initially laid to rest in the emergency military cemetery in Bari. After some time, he was transferred to his eternal resting place in the military cemetery on Mount Herzl in Jerusalem. After his death, the Israeli chief of staff made it known publicly that he had not known of such an excellent officer with such impressive achievements as Cohen, someone who contributed as significantly to the security of the country as he did. Number 9. Mayor Har Zion. March 4th, 1955, Har Zion and 3 ex-members of the 890th Paratroop Battalion in Israel went on a retaliatory mission against Bedouin tribesmen from Wadi al-Gad. A few months before this, these tribesmen had kidnapped Har Zion's sister, Shoshana, along with her boyfriend, Oded Wegmeister, from a small town in northern Israel. They were abused, tortured, and killed. In retaliation, Har Zion captured about 6 of these tribesmen, not caring whether or not they were involved in his sister's death. The prisoners were interrogated, but when he realized it wasn't leading anywhere, he killed 5 of them, 4 with knives, and he shot the 5th. The 6th man was sent back to his tribe to tell him what happened. This is just one of a dozen acts made by Har Zion, one of Israel's deadliest soldiers. February 25th, 1934. Har Zion was born in Herzliya, a city in the central coast of Israel. His parents got divorced when he was pretty young, but this experience gave Har Zion a sense of responsibility and independence. So in 1953, he was one of the founding members of Unit 101. This unit comprised of only the best of the best, the ones deemed to have supernatural powers of brutality on the front lines, as well as a sixth sense on the battlefield. Membership was by invitation only, and all existing members had to vote for a new recruit to be accepted. That's to put into perspective how secretive and meticulous this squad was. In the following years, they would be rebranded to the 890th Paratroop Battalion in Israel, orchestrating stealth and high-profile missions for the government. One such mission was the 1954 7-man squad attack on an Arab Legion camp that led to the death of multiple legionnaires. Har Zion looked unstoppable. He was a real-life commando. However, all it took to bring an end to his illustrious career was a wrongfully executed operation. Operation Jonathan. September 12, 1956. Operation Jonathan was a retaliatory attack by two paratroop groups, resulting in the death of 20 soldiers. During the fighting, Har Zion was wounded in the throat and arm. His life was saved by an army physician who performed a tracheotomy using his pocket knife while still under fire. While he barely survived, he was forced to cut off the injured arm and was deemed unable to continue his army career. But his story doesn't end there. Despite using only one hand, Har Zion was called upon to fight for Israel during the Six-Day War and Yom Kippur War on the Golan Front. What's crazy here is he survived while being an absolute savage on the battlefield. Seen as a national treasure, he passed away on March 14, 2014 at the age of 80. Number 8. Roy Klein. A formidable force on the battlefield, Klein was a war machine, a destroyer, ready to kill for his country. However, his determination to serve Israel and his love for his people led to his end in one of the most disturbing ways you can imagine. July 10, 1975. Roy Klein was born and raised in Ra'anana, Israel, and was tagged as a prodigy by those around him. He was exceptionally good at maths in high school and had a keen interest in the Israeli military. After graduation, he would join pre-military preparation school, where he dominated his peers during training. He was a one-man army, a real-life Iron Man, and there was no way Klein could be stopped from joining the IDF. Between 1994 and 2006, Klein served on and off the force, winning small and big battles for Israel, while gaining national recognition. However, in 2006, Klein, now a deputy commander of the 51st Battalion of the Golani Brigade, was ordered to lead his men into Israel's defense during the Lebanon War. Unfortunately for him, it would be his last battle. The 2006 Lebanon War was a 34-day military conflict between Hezbollah paramilitary forces and the IDF. Klein and his men were deployed to the town of Ben Jebel to take control. However, during a Hezbollah ambush, a hand grenade was thrown over the wall between the Hezbollah militants and Klein and his unit. This man jumped on a live grenade and wrapped the explosion with his body. His soldiers reported he recited the Jewish prayer, Shema Yisrael, as he jumped on that grenade. And after the explosion critically wounded him, he reported his own death, yelling, "Klein's dead, Klein's dead," over the radio. In the following minutes, as he lay dying, he told his soldiers who came to help him out to focus on Lieutenant Amichai Marhavia, another soldier who was hit by the explosion. We can't say this man wasn't selfless, but in the end, Klein handed over his encoded radio to another officer, who took command of the force, and he eventually died at the scene. Number 7. Michael Levan. Levan was an American-Israeli soldier under that 890th Paratrooper Battalion. He was the kind of guy to gun down his enemy without blinking, and his lethal precision earned him a notorious reputation on that battlefield, where even seasoned adversaries whispered tales of his chilling and unmatched prowess. However, he met an end far more gruesome than any man he had ever killed. February 17, 1984. Levan was born and raised in Holland, Pennsylvania, and was the grandson of 2 Holocaust survivors. He got inspired by the stories he was told by his grandparents and decided to relocate to Israel. Once he got there, he spent his first year studying Hebrew before joining the IDF. Now, there was a catch. As a foreign-born soldier without immediate family in Israel, Levan was considered a lone soldier in the IDF. Lone soldiers barely made it up in the ranks of the IDF, but there was just something about Levan that made him stand out. Subsequently, he was posted to the 890th Paratrooper Battalion, and 2 years later he was summoned to fight in the Second Lebanon War, the same war that would take his life. July 2006, Levan was back with his family in the Philly suburbs, hanging out with his twin sister and making plans to study medicine after he finished a tour with the Israeli military. However, he was called to fight alongside Israel as Hezbollah fighters attacked IDF soldiers in southern Lebanon. As the 890th moved into the area, they got hit hard with gunfire. The soldiers couldn't figure out where these shots were coming from, being under some heavy attack. As a result, the group was separated, with Levin's team finding a hiding spot in the back room of an empty store. A Hezbollah fighter got close and shot into the small room, hitting Levin in the head. He was seriously injured and couldn't be evacuated due to the ongoing gun battle. It took a few hours before medics arrived, and by that time he was gone. Levin was the first American and 36th IDF soldier killed during the Second Lebanon War. Number 6. Adar Cohen. They say what a man can do, a woman can do better. While that statement can be debated for years, the story of Miss Cohen here is a compelling testament to the truth behind that catchphrase. So first question, what exactly is this truth? February 3rd, 2016, Adar Cohen faced a very difficult situation in Israel. She was a 19-year-old woman who followed her passion, wanting to help others in a meaningful way, as she was determined to do so. She decided to enlist in a fighting unit of the IDF Border Police. She would work out day and night, knowing it wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't scared of hard work. Not a lot of women chose this direction, but she wasn't an ordinary woman. It was 2 months into her training when her and her unit were sent to guard Jerusalem's Damascus Gate. They had no clue what was about to happen when they woke up that day. Unfortunately, Adar and her unit were attacked that day by 3 Palestinian assailants, planning to kill as many of them as they could. The first one went for the force commander, who managed to neutralize him. The second physically attacked a soldier using a knife, stabbing her as many times as he could possibly try. Adar saw this and immediately came to her rescue, and at that moment she didn't freeze. She fought hard to save her unit, even though she just finished her training and had never done anything like this before. Adar successfully managed to neutralize the attacker and save her friend. And at this point, Adar and her unit thought it was over, but none of them knew about that third assailant, the one hiding in the shrubs. The one who also shot Adar twice in the back of her head. Adar was brought to the hospital in a critical condition, but died a few hours later. Thanks to her brave actions, she saved more than her unit. She saved hundreds of people who were traveling, living, and working in the area from future terror. Number 5. Yonathan Netanyahu. June 5, 1967, during the Six-Day War, Netanyahu's battalion fought the Battle of Katef in Sinai, neutralizing a significant number of opposition forces. However, he got wounded during that battle. It'd be an injury eventually contributing to his death. March 13, 1946. Yonathan Netanyahu was born in New York City, but kept shuffling between the US and Israel. After graduating from high school, he returned to Israel to join the IDF. Now, I've got to tell you, joining the IDF was the best decision he could ever make. Many of his peers doubted he could even make it past the training course, but he outdid himself. Like a real-life Superman, he tackled every challenge with unwavering determination, showing remarkable strength, agility, and smart thinking. To Netanyahu, it wasn't just about completing the training. It was about showcasing his skills, which is what made him somewhat of a legend in the military. 3 years later, he would be deployed to southern Lebanon, fighting alongside Israel. However, he got seriously wounded while trying to rescue a fallen soldier. Though he didn't die, it seemed like Netanyahu's career had come to an early end. But if it did, we wouldn't be making a video about him right now, would we? After being wounded, he returned to the US to study at Harvard, but left to rejoin the Israeli army. July 4th, 1976. Netanyahu was commanding Operation Entebbe, a rescue mission in Uganda. During the mission, Netanyahu fired at Ugandan soldiers, trying to clear a path, but was fatally shot in the process by a soldier from the airport's control tower. He was pronounced dead on the spot. Netanyahu was buried 2 days later, and the ceremony was attended by hundreds of people, alongside top-ranking officials in the military. During the eulogy, Shimon Peres, then defense minister, said,
"A bullet has torn the young heart of one of Israel's finest sons, one of its most courageous warriors, one of its most promising commanders, the magnificent Yonathan Netanyahu."
Number 4. Moshe Dayan. The story of Dayan is one that would leave you both mesmerized and thrilled at the same time. May 20th, 1915, Dayan was born on Israel's first kibbutz and was raised on the country's first successful cooperative farm settlement. He began his journey to become one of Israel's deadliest soldiers when he learned guerrilla warfare tactics from a British officer named Captain Orda Wingate. in the Special Night Squadrons. From there, Dayan would join the Haganah, an illegal Jewish defense force, and was arrested and imprisoned by British authorities. This, however, didn't stop his pursuit to serve in the military. In 1941, after his release, he led Palestinian Jewish forces against the Vichy French in Syria when he lost his left eye in action. Thereafter, he began wearing a black patch that became his hallmark, but it also made him one of the most recognized soldiers in the entire country. During the 1948 War of Independence in Israel, Moshe took charge as the commander of the Jerusalem area. The following year, 1949, he played a role in negotiations for an armistice between Jordan and Israel. Seeing how successful he was in all his operations, he was called to serve as a chief of staff of the Israeli Armed Forces, strategically planning and leading the 1956 invasion of the Sinai Peninsula. And just when it seemed like he couldn't top all these achievements, he did, by becoming a recognized member in Israel's political arena. In 1959, Dayan delved into politics, securing a seat in parliament. Now, this wouldn't take him entirely off the battlefield. He was appointed the Minister of Defense, collaborating with then Chief of Staff, Yitzhak Rabin, to direct the operations during the Six-Day War. He personally oversaw the capture of East Jerusalem, using strategies he learned from the U.S. Marine Corps. But as prolific as he was on and off the battlefield, Dayan's influence in Israel began deteriorating. October 6, 1973, the unexpected attacks by Egypt and Syria drew criticism towards Dayan for the country's perceived lack of preparedness. In the hours preceding the war, Dayan chose not to order a full mobilization or a preemptive strike against the Egyptians and Syrians. He assumed that Israel would be able to win easily even if the Arabs attacked, and more importantly, didn't want Israel to appear as the aggressor, as it would have undoubtedly cost the invaluable support of the U.S. This cost Israel significant damage in the first 2 days. Subsequently, when Rabin took over as prime minister a year later, he excluded Dayan from his cabinet. This led to his resignation and retirement, but it didn't put an end to a number of controversies he was involved in, one of which was his massive acquisition of private antiques and artifacts from different locations in Africa, which surfaced after his death in 1981. So to put an end to it, his wife sold the collection to the Israel Museum. Number 3. Yitzhak Rabin. From being a top military officer to being the Prime Minister of Israel, this man was a treasure to his people. However, in the end, the price he paid was a brutal assassination carried out by his own people. March 1st, 1922. Rabin was born in Jerusalem and had to fend for his family after the passing of his father. However, he would work many shifts to make ends meet and attend Kanduri Agricultural School before finally finding himself on the battlefield. 1949, during the Arab-Israeli Wars, Rabin established himself as a key instrument in Israel's operations. On one hand, he directed missions in and around Jerusalem, and on the other, he would fight Egyptians along with the IDF at Negev. Now, throughout the course of this video, we mentioned the Six-Day War a couple of times, and you might have been wondering who actually won that war. Well, it was Israel, but only after Rabin provided some quality intelligence to the military. He came up with this strategic brilliance involving destroying this enemy aircraft and capitalizing on the element of surprise. By going deeper into politics, he would become Prime Minister of Israel twice. But all it took was one wrong move, and that sent him 6 feet under. November 4th, 1995. Rabin had recently agreed to a peace treaty between his country and the Palestine Liberal Organization, or PLO, and was attending a mass rally at the Kings of Israel Square. When that rally ended, Rabin walked down the City Hall steps towards the open door of his car, at which point a right-wing extremist, identified as Yigal Amir, fired 3 shots at him with a semi-auto pistol. Rabin took 2 shots, and the third lightly injured Yoram Rubin, one of Rabin's bodyguards. Rabin was taken to the nearby Ichilov Hospital, where he died of blood loss and 2 punctured lungs. Amir, just like a host of other Israelis, was against the peace treaty, leading him to carry out that assassination. Rabin's assassination shocked the Israeli public and the rest of the world. Hundreds of thousands would gather around the square where he was taken out to mourn his death, while his funeral was attended by many world leaders. Among them was U.S. President Bill Clinton, Australian Prime Minister Paul Keating, Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, and King Hussein of Jordan. And during the ceremony, President Clinton delivered a eulogy that ended with the Hebrew words, Shalom Haver, loosely translated to, goodbye friend. Number 2. Ariel Shadon. In Israel, the name Ariel Shadon doesn't just represent a person, it's a symbol of triumph, marking his remarkable feat as one of the nation's longest-serving soldiers. With a military career spanning 25 years, his journey was a saga of battles, but the conclusion was far from a straightforward victory. February 26, 1928, Ariel was born and raised in Kfar Malal, pre-state Israel. Right from childhood, he was fascinated by the military and was recorded as one of the youngest people to ever enter the IDF at just 14 years old. His age, however, didn't match the level of wisdom and technicality on the battlefield. He matched in physical strength with recruits way older, and while maneuvering a gun, he was blessed with precision. During the Israeli War of Independence, Ariel founded the 101 Special Commando Unit, a ruthless military unit that engaged in retaliatory operations against Palestinian Fedayeen. He would be commanding Paratroop Corps in the Sinai Campaign, the Kibbutz Massacre, the Suez Crisis, and the Yom Kippur War. He was also regarded as the greatest field commander in their history. However, after 25 years on active duty, he resigned and delved into politics, an endeavor that eventually led to his death. Between 1977 and 92, Ariel joined the Likud party and served in a number of ministerial posts. One of these would lead to him being the Minister of Defense, where he directed the 1982 Lebanon War. But the one act that made him an international enemy was orchestrating the direct attack on Palestinian refugees in Sabra and Shatila. This earned him the moniker Butcher of Beirut among Arabs. The media tagged him as an enemy, not to the people of Israel, but to the neighboring countries. It became a bigger story when campaigning for a 2001 prime election. He would make a controversial visit to the Al-Aqsa complex on the Temple Mount. To his luck, he won the election and served as prime minister from 2001 to 2006. However, he suffered a stroke on January 4, 2006, and was in a permanent vegetative state until his death in 2014. And number 1. Ashraf Marwan. Ashraf, or as he's remembered, the Angel, is the man who saved Israel from a war absolutely no one saw coming. But the story runs deeper than this. February 2, 1944, Marwan was born in Egypt. He would graduate from Cairo University with a degree in chemical engineering and was conscripted into the army. That same year, he met Mona Nasser, the then president's second daughter, who was 17 at the time. She fell in love with him, but her father suspected that Ashraf's interest in his daughter stemmed more from her political status than her personal charms. Regardless, Nasser agreed to marriage after much persuasion from his daughter, but it would mark the beginning of Ashraf's journey as a spy. 1973, after the death of President Nasser, Ashraf was appointed to be in charge of Egypt's foreign relations. At the same time, Egypt had begun preparing a war with the aim of retaking the Sinai Peninsula, which it had lost to Israel during the Six-Day War in 1967. His unparalleled access to his nation's best-kept secrets, especially after his promotion in May 1971, allowed him to provide Israel with information about the coming war, including the full Egyptian war plans, detailed accounts of military exercises, original documentation of Egypt's arms deals with the Soviet Union and other countries, the Egyptian military order of battle, along with dozens of other information. That information hit the desks of Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir, Defense Minister Moshe Dayan, and IDF Force Chief of Staff Chaim Bar-Lev in raw form. It's like getting the answers for the hardest test of your life. The IDF were ready to wage the Egyptians' battle plan based on the information that Ashraf provided. However, on the day the documents stated the Egyptians would attack, they didn't. This occurred 2 more times, with later investigations revealing that Ashraf deliberately provided wrong information to earn the trust of the Egyptians who had already begun suspecting his activities. In autumn of the said year, the Egyptians finally decided to launch their attack on Israel, and despite intel provided by Ashraf to IDF, they ignored him, believing he was handing them falsified information as he did in the past. Consequently, Israel was caught by surprise in the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. But the repercussion for Ashraf was his murder. June 27, 2007, Ashraf was found dead in his home. The cause was ruled as traumatic aortic rupture following a fall from the balcony of his fifth-floor apartment, but not many people believe that story. News reports indicated that he might have been murdered, a belief also held by his elder son, Gamal. Some say he was killed by Israeli soldiers, the same people he had risked his life to protect. Others say he might have been killed by an evil faction of the Egyptian government, being that he was the third Egyptian living in London to die under similar circumstances, all of whom had ties with the Egyptian security services. So the question of what happened to Ashraf Marwan that fateful day is a question we might never get an answer to.